Do this now, yeah.
Okay.
So Doug McIntyre here, editor at ClimateCrisis247. I'm with David Calloway, the other editor, and normally he's on one coast and I'm on the other. Today we're together. We talk about EVs endlessly. It's like half of our conversations. Some interesting things have happened though recently, and let me start with the first one. I got a report yesterday that said that the best deal on used cars in terms of discount from list price of the top 15, 13 are EVs. If you want to get the best deal possible as a reduction from what the MSRP was, it's EVs. So demand for EVs isn't just getting smaller. There is no market for used EVs.
No.
What does it tell you that people don't want to buy? They don't want to buy new. They don't even want to buy them if there's a deal.
Yeah, EVs are really a first adapter type product, right? People want the shiny new toy, the ones that want EVs. The idea that there's a lot of good discount deals out there just shows the automakers have been cutting prices. Tesla, for one, has been cutting prices for more than a year to move volume to little success. But because the EV is basically a bunch of amenities surrounding a battery, the idea that you're going to buy a used battery just isn't as sexy as a used Porsche or a used Firebird.
Ford announced two things about their Mustang Mach-E. The first one is that you can now rent them at the dealers. Now, the reason for that is they can't sell them. Okay, so that's reason. Number two, they will give you a 0% loan on Mustang Mach-E for 72 months. Now, a typical car loan, if I went over to Chase right now, is 5 or 6%. What does that tell you about the ability for Ford to sell EVs at all?
They're having a hard time pushing them. And the bigger problem is no one wants to rent them either. Because you go to the rental lot and they're like, we've got this great thing. You're going to get the new Ford Mustang EV. And you're like, oh, that's cool. And you take a look at it and you're like, well, I'm in a strange city. I've rented a car. I have no idea where the charging stations are. I'm just going to get stuck. And so anecdotally, lots of people have been given these things and said, actually, I want a gas powered car.
It occurred to me recently, but I think it's a big problem. I've talked to several car dealers, and if you say, well, what do you think of the EVs that were sent to you by Ford? They don't want to sell EVs. They don't. There's no service. As you know, car dealers make money on service. There's very little service for EVs. It's done mostly over the air. So do you think the car companies have sort of shot themselves in the foot again by not giving the dealers any real incentives to sell EVs?
I think they have. I mean, they've spent so much time trying to think of incentives for customers that they haven't thought about the folks who are actually selling the products. Dealers play an important role in car sales, and they always have. And you've already heard complaints about EVs. There's no reason to go test drive it with your dealer and stuff like that, and you can buy them online and just go pick it up. And that's supposed to make it easier, but people are used to the other way, and without dealers kind of talking you through the pros and cons, I'm not sure that it's ever going to catch on that way. You need to have the dealers on board. You can't. I know that Tesla doesn't use dealers for the most part. They have dealerships,
right?
So you can go in and look and see and test drive. But if you buy the car, it's between you and your phone or your.
Oh, look, my son bought a Tesla yesterday. He test drove it a few miles away. When he was ready to order it, he ordered it on the phone.
Yeah.
They told him when it got there, which was the same day. He went over and he drove it away. There was no salesman. Nobody, how the salesman spends 30 minutes telling you about all the features in the cars. There was nobody there to say anything.
The key's in it, right?
Yep. You get in it and you literally then take it and drive it away. Hovering over the entire EV conversation, certainly in the United States and Europe, is BYD. It's now the world's largest EV company. It's bigger than Tesla. Almost all of what it sells is in China, but they have good EVs for like $15,000, not junky EVs, and they're coming out with higher and higher and higher end models. What happens when they get into the United States and Europe with these things?
Well, they will find their way in. It will not be easy. China, for instance, is trying to do deals to build plants in Mexico, right? And then they would get in through NAFTA, although the government is fighting that. They're trying to get in Europe. They're having a little more success. I think you're going to see them become very competitive. People want to buy on quality and cost. And, these BYD is the biggest seller. They have high-end cars too.
I know.
You can buy an $80,000 or $90,000 BYD. It's just going to be, at least in the U.S., it's not going to be politically expedient. Folks driving around in their BYDs are not going to be very popular among the auto workers unions. But in Europe, I think where people are a little more prone to care about renewable energy and climate change, a little more prone to care about smaller cars that use less or no gas. I think China has a real shot at making some inroads there.
Now, you're not old enough to remember this, but I am. There was a time when there were no Japanese cars in the United States. And people would look at you like, why did you buy that Japanese car for the first 5 or 6 years? Why didn't you buy an American car? This looks like that. In other words, people will look at you weird and you'll buy it. But a few years down the road, it's like, well, I have one too.
It's going to be even worse than that, Doug, because the new vehicles have the added threat, if you will, of being computer connected to some vast data center back in China, right? The Biden administration's argument for not allowing BYD into this country and being worried about the Mexican loophole is that they're concerned that China will be spying us while we're in our cars. And, it seems like a bit of a stretch to me, but who knows, right? I just find out the fact that the cars are that we're driving right now are computers anyway is scary enough, knowing what I know about computers. But people are going to, back then when Japan was just breaking into the US, there was no computers on our cars,
No.
Right? This is going to be a different story. It's a different level of paranoia and nationalism.
Yeah. One of the things in the EV markets recently is, look, this EV is a little bit of a commodity, but guess what? We also have a self-driving EV. So if EV wasn't enough, you can sit and have tea in your car or read a book and you'll be fine. Now, there have been a lot of Tesla accidents, so people are a little paranoid about that. But the Highway Safety Administration came out with its big test today of self-driving systems. And out of 14 cars tested, 1 passed. So the idea that you're going to upgrade people, from an EV to an EV that's self-driving, and that's going to drive a lot of demand, it looks like that's shot for now.
It is. It's always going to be in the back burner because it's so sexy. But the last thing, if you're scared to ride in a car that is essentially a computer, you got to be even more scared to want to have a car drive you that's a computer. I live in California, in the Bay Area, and you go out on the highway and you see plenty of driverless cars. They're testing them out, the all sorts of different brands. The Google brand and some of the others, the Tesla brands. And it's a little bit disconcerting when you look over and there's no one driving the car. I haven't seen any problems, but I wouldn't want to get in them, at least not yet.
It seems to me that for the first time in 3 or 4 years, gas-powered car companies are considered great. I mean, they're not, they were going to fall apart. They were going to be Ford was going to be bankrupt, all this other stuff. Between their gas cars and hybrids, which they sort of always hid in the back, we want to sell you an EV so you don't show them the hybrid. But hybrids and gas-powered cars are immensely popular now.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're starting to learn about how the market for EVs is going to develop. People aren't just going to give up their gas powered and go EV. Some of them will, the first adapters, but most people would prefer the hybrid and are preferring the hybrids so they can test it out. Also, those hybrids check a vital box for the auto companies because their emissions are lower. Yeah. And we've got a lot of emission standards coming into play in the next several years where, states like California and stuff, I don't know how they're ever going to meet those, but the hybrids are helping.
Well, it seems to me that the gas-powered guys will live to fight another day, which a little while ago people didn't think they would. But the car industry is now evolving so fast that it's doubling back on itself historically.
Yeah.
It's like a back into the future thing. You're in a DeLorean, you're in the car, and all of a sudden gas-powered cars are popular.
I think so. I think they're going to be around for a while, particularly since the shelf life of a car is several years. People buying them today are going to have them for at least several years. It may be at some point that they become luxuries, right? If the EVs are priced low enough so that everyone's, you'll be status symbol to have a
if you have a V8,
car.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we'll see.
Good to see you again.
Well, as always, in New York.
Good. I will send both of those to Sean.
Great.
He'll do the same thing. I did not realize that